Griffin Poetry Prize 2005. Judge's Citation. Charles Simic. Simic is something of a magician, a conjurer. Out of nothing, it seems, out of thin air, the poems appear before our eyes. One apparently casual observation leads to another, and suddenly, exponentially, we are spellbound. It is a trick many have tried to imitate, but few have achieved. At the center of Simic's art is a disarming, deadpan precision, which should never be mistaken for simplicity. Everything appears pared back to the solid and the essential, and it is this economy of vocabulary and clarity of diction which have made his poetry so portable and so influential wherever it is published. Simic is one of the few poets of our time to achieve both critical and popular acclaim. He is genuinely quotable, and it is entirely possible that some of his phrases and lines will lodge in the common memory. Without any hint of loftiness, then, and from a position which is entirely his own, Simic manages to speak to the many, and not just the few. Shelley, for M. Folane. Charles Simic.
Poet of the dead leaves, driven like ghosts, driven like pestilence-stricken multitudes, I read you first one rainy evening in New York City, in my atrocious Slavic accent, saying the mellifluous verses from a battered, much-stained volume I had bought earlier that day in a second-hand bookstore on 4th Avenue, run by initiates of the occult masters. The little money I had being almost spent, I walked the streets, my nose in a book. I sat in a dingy coffee shop with last summer's dead flies on the table. The owner was an ex-sailor who had grown a huge hump on his back while watching the rain, the empty streets. He was glad to have me sit and read. He'd refill my cup with a liquid dark as river Styx. Shelley spoke of a mad, blind, dying king, of rulers who neither see nor feel nor know, of graves from which a glorious phantom may burst to illumine our tempestuous day. I too felt like a glorious phantom going to have my dinner in a Chinese restaurant I knew so well. It had a three-fingered waiter who would bring my soup and rice each night without ever saying a word. I never saw anyone else there. The kitchen was separated by a curtain of glass beads which clicked faintly whenever the front door opened. The front door opened that evening to admit a pale little girl with glasses. The poet spoke of the everlasting universe of things, of gleams of a remoter world which visit the soul in sleep, of a desert peopled by storms alone. The streets were strewn with broken umbrellas which looked like funereal kites this little Chinese girl might have made. The bars in MacDougall Street were emptying. There had been a fist fight. A man leaned against a lamppost, arms extended as if crucified, the rain washing the blood off his face. In a dimly lit side street, where the sidewalk shone like a ballroom mirror at closing time, a well-dressed man without any shoes asked me for money. His eyes shone. He looked triumphant, like a fencing master who had just struck a mortal blow. How strange it all was. The world's raffle, that dark October night. The yellowed volume of poetry with its splendors and glooms, which I studied by the light of storefronts, drugstores, and barber shops, afraid of my small windowless room, cold as a tomb of an infant emperor.
Selected Poems, 1963 to 2003, by Charles Simic.
I started writing in high school, my last year in high school, not because I wanted to particularly write poetry, but I discovered that two of my friends were writing poetry, so I read their poems and I thought, well, let me see if I can write a poem myself, and it turned out I couldn't, so that kind of astonished me, and I started going to the library, reading poetry just to get some ideas how to write poetry, and without really realizing, it became an obsession. It became something that I was, really interested in. And as to how many books I published, they tell me it's not a poetry just, but I think poetry about 20 or 22 or something like that. It's hard to count them because some of them are like the selected poems. This is a combination of other books, but something like that.